All right, good afternoon. I just want to introduce my friend. This is Pastor Coach. What are all the
It's been a long
titles?
time for anything with coaching.
Mr. Pastor Coach Perry McCall. He's my new friend. We got connected through Russell Roberts and Christian Medical and Dental Association connections. He is the regional director of
Area director
of Christian Medical and Dental Association in Jackson
CMDA Jackson
at UMC and in the Jackson area also. And also he's a pastor of Carolina Presbyterian Church in Madden, Mississippi. He's a former coach of many sports and Bible teacher at Leak Academy.
It's a teacher at League Academy and flunky for the coaches. I didn't coach anything. I was
assistant to the assistant.
I wasn't that high up on the list. It was whatever Piggins and Ray needed, and Shepherd. I was the one doing it. So if nobody else was doing it, I was the one doing it. And
well,
so
needless to say, Perry wears many hats, and we'll get into that a little bit. I just, again, am introducing myself, Meredith Travelstead, in Jackson, Mississippi, because Russell actually reminded me that I didn't introduce myself. And I've just been sharing these testimonies, really, because, my scripture that I cling to is Psalm 105, and it's give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people, sing unto him, sing songs unto him, talk ye of all his wondrous works, glory ye in his holy name, let the heart of them rejoice that seek the Lord in his strength, seek his face evermore, remember the marvelous works that he hath done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth. And I'll just boil it down to those verbs: give thanks, make known, sing unto, talk ye, glory ye, seek, and remember. And so we're just going to remember some of the wondrous things that the Lord has done today through Perry and in Perry's life. So first of all, where did you grow up, Perry McCall?
Outside of Memphis in Bartlett, Tennessee. So, which is essentially a Memphis boy, in some ways. But it was also Bartlett at that time was made fun of as the cow town. We were the FFA school back in those days, but now it's a full blown, like 6,000 when we were moving there, and it's 30, 40, 50,000. Little town, preppy suburb now. For where it is.
And you came to know the Lord at a young age in a Christian home. Is that right?
Yeah. Growing up at Bartlett Baptist, Dr. Hayes, my pastor, and mom and dad, Christian home, and all the good senses, that word, and we being Bartlett Baptist and Bartlett Elementary, just my life, as a kid. There was just there wasn't anything else, and just a little small town life, and so it's first grade, coming to faith.
And did you know that you wanted to go into ministry at a young age?
I wouldn't so much say no as much as it was a thought and began at a very early age. There was a young man in our church, Rusty Jones, and he died in a car accident, and we were real close with their family, and his grandparents lived real close to our house, and we visited that night. Our pastor was there, and everybody was there, and my mom was a Sunday school teacher, and we were just all connected in the church, and I just remember that night just watching our pastor and wanting to do the things that he was doing, and then just being consumed, sitting there as the little kid, with everybody doing all their stuff, and there's a Bible on the table, and I grabbed the Bible, and I just barely remember it. I think it was the opening comfort passages from 2 Corinthians, but eventually they let me read a passage. I found it. I'm not even sure how I found it, just looking up, things in the Bible and the concordance. Shows you how I grew up in a good church, because I was a little kid knowing how to use a concordance, trying to find something in the Bible. And but I remember, at that time, not something I could think in terms of being called to ministry, but it's a real distinct moment that I remember wanting to do this, kind of thing. And then it was junior high and getting into high school, where just all different various times, just sitting under, in worship, under the preached word, just thinking either this is what I'm supposed to do in terms of preaching, or it'd be something in a passage, dealing with those kinds of things, and so that kind of crystallized pretty much, in high school, for sure.
Then you went on to Southern Mississippi.
Actually, I went on to Memphis State University. Oh yeah, I was a Memphis boy completely. Okay. Oh yeah, okay. And so before I finished high school, I started trying to do anything but go into ministry, and that's kind of how I ended up at Southern Miss, because eventually I just it was who knows where I was going to end up being and doing if I didn't get out of town. And so I ended up finishing my senior year at USM, and left there, and that was a few years after graduation. I spent most of my time at Memphis State. We changed over to the University of Memphis at the time. And so
then you went on to seminary
in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. And you met your wife before that.
Not long before that, I was got right with the Lord at USM and Temple Baptist Church, and God brought that calling full circle back into reality, and I started doing youth ministry at Sand Hill Baptist Church outside of Ellisville, and just going to local football games and First Baptist Ellisville, and eventually,
cute little girl there.
Eventually, met my wife, and we went on a date. She went to church, told everybody she was going to marry me, and then that following Thursday, she told me. And about a month later, we were engaged. And
a woman who knows
and that was
about
20-something years ago. And then we got married, and then that Monday, took my final exams from the first semester at New Orleans.
And then the baby started coming.
Coming as we're finishing seminary in 2000. And Julia, when she's almost 21 now, the junior at Rhodes, and then the twins came when so Julia's born in New Orleans, and the twins when we were outside of Nashville, and they were preemies, and we spent a life of the PICU and NICU there at Vanderbilt, for them, and they're 18 and seniors at Lee. And then Mama wanted a boy, and tried to explain to her there was no guarantee, but she was convinced, and then we got Andrew.
That's great.
And he was born in Hattiesburg.
Mm-hmm. And you had a church there?
No, I was on the way back to New Orleans, planning on finish up my doctoral work there, and Katrina hit, and so then Andrew was born, and then we ended up in Madden.
Okay.
I did disaster relief work out of Baton Rouge, and Madden Baptist, Tommy Jones, got really desperate because they couldn't find a pastor, so he called one of his favorite pastors from the past, and he happened to be pastor down in Baton Rouge, and that's how I ended up there. They got desperate and found me.
Now, and Madden became a special place for you and your family. You've been there a long time.
Pushing 16 years. We've been, on that field. I was at Madden Baptist almost 4 years, and I became Presbyterian, the PCA, variety for your Jackson folks. That makes me a First Pres Jackson First Pres Jackson type of. I'm a Ligon type of, Presbyterian.
Right.
And so we moved 2 miles down the road there in Madden, and became, the Presbyterian. And any given person out there might still think I'm the Baptist pastor, because that's just the way Madden is.
We Baptists will take you in. And then about that time, you were also still teaching Bible at the Academy, and then even some in Jackson, like Belhaven.
With Belhaven, I was doing that. Came actually after Andrew was diagnosed. That was
so talk about Andrew's diagnosis.
Yeah, that was
Andrew was 8 years old.
Yes, 8.5 years old, July 2nd, 2014. I was diagnosed with high-risk T-cell ALL leukemia, here at Children's in Batson. And so it was probably a year or so into that, and I started doing just adjunct teaching online, things for Belhaven. And then it's been recently, the Lilly Endowment granted $1 million gift for training and working with rural pastors. And so it's a Rural Pastors Initiative, and I'm associate director, of that program. So that's what I do with Belhaven now, is that, which allows me to just be at the church, the home, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he was diagnosed then, 3 years, 4 months, 19 days of chemo, radiation, and steroids, and then
As a little 9-year-old.
Yeah, 9, 10, 11 years old, and then and so he took his last pills at the end of October in 2017, and then in April 2018 he was full relapse, and then in July 24th to 25th he was rebirthed with his new bone marrow and a full bone marrow transplant. And then January 2019 he went down, he got RSV, turned into interstitial pneumonia, which turned into acute respiratory syndrome, just like the COVID patients get, multi-organ syndrome, and Dr. Lauren Vigeois went in and took care of him, and as our PICU says, we had to call in the family and get everybody prepared, and went through the process. I mean, it was deep enough. We even prepared and got 3C nurses and some doctors prepared for the funeral, the whole 9 yards. It was not looking good, but as I like to quote Dr. Laura, Sexton, she said, if we make it through the weekend, he may have 50 shot, and she goes, but we do pretty good with 50-50 around here. And so about 19 days with his first stint on the vent was 19 days there at that point, and then we had a couple of more. I forget how many ICU trips we went through. That actually was 102 days during that period. And then he's been recovering from that, having to learn how to walk, and severe critical care myopathy, and then he developed vascular necrosis in his bones, and got permanent fractured ankles from that. So he's been having to learn how to walk, and all that treatment. He's got a broken diaphragm, which I like to blame that on Dr. Barry Burge. I mean, he's cut on him so many times. I figure it's got to be his fault, and I haven't convinced him yet, but so he got no diaphragm. They took his spleen, took his gallbladder, cataracts, got a hole or two with his heart, and then just the lasting damage with his lungs. But out of these 7 years, he has had one doctor. We've had one time that he has actually been released, and so his kidneys are no longer monitored or watched. They went into failure and all kinds of damage, but they have fully recovered, and we have no kidney appointments on the table. So we've been released by one doctor.
Andrew is a very, very, very special boy. He's a miracle.
He's a miracle, and he's a nut, and he's Andrew. I mean, it's just it's all a story in and of itself.
And we have common friends, the Dales. Campbell was a really good friend, and they knew each other. And you've shown me pictures.
They were. Campbell was on the floor when we got diagnosed. He was, I guess, diagnosed maybe 6 months before Andrew was, and then David Strain had become the pastor at First Pres, and he and I had been friends before he came to First Pres at all, because he came as a staff person first. And bless the church's heart, he mentioned us being friends, and Nan Kip and Crane Kip, and then just the entire women's ministry of First Pres took us in as the pastor's, long lost best friend, trying to do
Adopted
something.
you.
Oh yeah, it was just, literally,
But that's
from
what
then
the
on,
body of Christ
we've,
is, right?
as I've said, we've had roughly therein a calendar year of actual admission days in the hospital, and
So,
before the month of June,
365 days.
I mean,
you've
it's
lived
something
at
or
that
more at that hospital.
Which is how far of a drive from your home?
It's a 72, depending on which way it comes, 72 or 74 miles to Garage B. And,
Which you've made many times.
And, but yeah, before June was over, not counting the weekends, but occasionally the weekends, the women of First Pres and occasionally with Pear Orchard, as well would step in. But their women's circle and Nan just, ran ramen the whole thing. They fed Brahmin lunch every single day she'd been in the hospital. Just about.
Wow.
Almost every weekday she's been in the hospital. There's been a lunch delivered to Robin.
I just can't imagine walking through this as a parent, and I've seen it with Jill and the Dales, and I guess I can't imagine how Andrew has felt, losing a friend and knowing his.
And this was all young, and so it's been a different conversation than way back then. We had a moment where we, of course, you're trained in a lot of this, counseling and talking through things, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out early on, what does Andrew know without asking him specific questions, because if he's not thinking about dying, I don't want him to start thinking about dying, and so you're just kind of going through this, and we knew that he really knew that he could die from this, because in our family worship and in reading the scripture, I started noticing he would never read the word death, dying, or anything. And I caught that in a couple of passages, and then I had him read a passage on purpose that I knew had it in there, and he skipped it again. And then I forget how we had that conversation that night, but it came up, and it wasn't direct, but then I guess I asked him why he wasn't, and he said something. I was like, okay, he knows it, for sure. And then there were just some things came up a little later, and so we knew it, but as time has gone on, we know now that it was a very concrete world. Because he was just having 40-day and 30-day stints in the hospital. You'll be in here a week and it's a month, kind of thing. And so basically, no fever, the activity room, everything was fine. It was just, do I have fever today? Can I go to the playroom? Tiffany and if that was going, and he was back, and he had his nurses, the 3C life. He was just in hog heaven as long as he didn't have fever. If he had fever, he had to stay in the room, and he was locked down. So for years, it was a real day-to-day, living thing. But he was very conscious and aware. With Campbell, he was on the floor that day, there at First Pres. We make, the connections. David and I are really close, and you're constantly going. We're in the clinics, together, and they just kind of, Andrew and Campbell had their just kind of own, Campbell chose Andrew to let him in, so Andrew got to be in, be in Campbell's club, and so, we have the Make-A-Wish, they have the Make-A-Wish, thing, for Campbell. Andrew goes, and he is very aware of, timing, everything that is going on, with that, all the way through, and
he's had to grow,
and that was his
a lot earlier,
and Campbell was his first one, and he's had others, since then. There's been a few that he's just known of, but there was Campbell, and then there was Freddie, and we lost Freddie while he was having his bone marrow transplant, and and that was, so he's older, and so he's 8th grade, 7th grade, age now, and that was a rough one, and it took pretty much all the 3C nurses coming over and visiting, throughout the day. But he really wasn't okay until Missy Lane came at about 10 o'clock before she went home that night. I mean, it really, it was just, Tom wouldn't do anything. And so, that one, he had a fuller personal investment, I made that, kind of, experience with it. And then, of course, everything with the 102 days, and everything happened, with that. Eventually all those memories came back, and he knows the whole drill now. And,
well, I got to meet him not long ago, and wow, he looks so great and healthy and vibrant, happy, and he was wearing his football jersey on the football field with the players about to run out at Lake Academy. What a sweet young man he is.
Yeah, if he's just standing there, you wouldn't have any clue whatsoever anymore. And
he's really
and that's new. These last 3 years, he has it's been a long 3 years, and he has looked.
What is he thinking versus what his parents are thinking?
Well, after he went down, and he physically did not come back after the intensive care. So much so. It was like watching this combination of externally, and we even had discussions. Has he had a stroke? It was like, surely he hasn't, because of all the other reasons he didn't. But that's what it was like, and it was also like he was a kind of a quadriplegic. He could move his arm like this. Now he had feeling and everything, but he just really couldn't do anything. And that went on for a while, working the therapy. But he couldn't stand on his own, just any of that kind of stuff. And so he experienced the feeling of, I'm never going to walk again. I'm never going to do anything again. And he went a whole baseball season, Mississippi State, at times not even being able to watch it because it would hurt too much to lean up. And so he would just, because we hooked up the Hulu or whatever it was, in the hospital. And so even the midweek games that came through the streaming with no announcers or anything, he would just listen. He would just listen to the games.
He's a huge Mississippi State baseball fan.
The
national championship was huge, and all sports.
And more than that, at this point, he's full blown. His great granddaddy played on the '42 SEC championship team, and the uncle is on Billy Howard is a Hall of Famer there, and however many played football there. And his Mimi, my goodness, it was a borderline sickness on how bad. How Mississippi State his Mimi was, and so he gets it honest. He gets it honest, but he's Coach Lamonis' assistant coach, and he's the hype coach, and throughout all this, this year he sends the team Sunday chapel, videos, and so he's just he's a Mississippi State baseball staffer.
That is incredible.
Coach and Jake took him in all during when he
got that from his daddy,
when his
right?
bone marrow transplant. They got a hold of him, and then Jake and him became buddies about 3 days before he went into intensive care. They actually, met. And then that team was just with him. And then time for the Governor's Cup. He still weren't out. And, Coach had called me and they made plans to come visit him at the house on the way down for the game. This was a couple of months in advance, but he was still in the hospital. And so they brought the whole team, to see him and the kids, there, at the hospital, to Batson, and
wow,
and
so
got to have his first team picture and all those kinds of things. And but back to how Andrew sees things.
Right.
There's actually when I was telling that. What Andrew will tell you was that in that moment, and I can tell you, I had no idea. There was no sign of this. For me seeing it, although he was not working for himself in the way that he always had before, but he was so down and so weak. We weren't too concerned about it.
Mm-hmm.
But he had, and this sounds like bragging on your kid, but he showed about an ounce of attitude a time or two with therapy. And I just cannot tell you, he has never shown an ounce of attitude for anything the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to chill on him one time because he was coming to the clinic and they were not going to access, his port. Then they said he was going to access his port. He threw his backpack down and said he wouldn't do it. And I got him by the arm, took him in a room, and we had a little halftime, locker room conversation. And that had been the only moment that anything like that had ever happened. But he had a moment or two. I mean, so much so we noticed it. But we knew just how sick he was. But he has since talked about it a lot. He had, in his mind, he quit. What's the point? I've gone through all of this. Now this. What's the point? But when the team came to see him, that's when he decided, I'm going to walk again so I can go to the baseball. I'm getting out of here before the season's over. And we made it back to all things when he played University of Memphis. I think was the first game, on a Tuesday night game.
So great.
We got out on like a Thursday, and that Tuesday we were at the game for the first time to see him. And what that is, because he could not walk. We had to play catch forever with him sitting in a wheelchair. And so Andrew, he gets out, he's starting to run and play, and he has vascular necrosis, fracture. He has to put pins in his hip. Now he got permanent ankles, all these kind of things. Mm. And what Andrew does, what makes him different, Andrew sees everything based on what he is getting to do. Whereas now on this other end of it, mom and dad, all we can see is what he can't do and won't be able to do. And that's, and so like Andrew goes to the game, he went to the pep rally, gets to walk out, and I'm sitting there with him. And he goes this whole story. He said, this will be the first time, because he was all late growing up, a little kid, in elementary school. So no telling how many times he's walked out with the team at the game and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, this will be the first time that I walk out and I'm not the center, of attention. And I said, that's right. He goes, I'm just supposed to be here. Wow. And then he said, hey, this is nerve-wracking. Well, something would be more nerve-wracking if you were the center of attention. And he just looked at me, I've been waiting to do this my entire life. Oh. And going to the games, playing, we play batting practice. I'm, throwing to him outside. He's just hitting dingers, and he's just happy as he can be. I'm sitting there just trying to hold it together. He's never going to get to play baseball. And so that's, that's where we are now. And so you have those moments, but if you're not doing one of those things, because you got to remember, I was a leak, all the time. I've never done anything for as many years as I actually did leak in the same place at the same time. And by the time his kids, his class started walking down my hallway, which is, the way the leak works, you have these two hallways, they started coming down my hallway, and it became miserable. Going to the football field, I went into the gymnasium, trying to go see some basketball games, kids I've taught, stuff to go through. Misery, because now it's his,
his age,
his age, his kids, his childhood best friends. And then I just got meaner and meaner, each year that went by, so it was time for me to get out of there.
So what has God taught you through this?
His verse is Isaiah, 41:10. That he is going to pick on his own, and in that passage, fear not, with us, he will strengthen us, he will keep us, he will uphold us. Then when you move on into Isaiah 44, it talks about he will carry us through the water, we will not drown, through the fire, we will not be burned. And then in Peter, the passage of being kept. And David Strange shared with Robin, the famous Scottish, pastor who, in Scottish negative fashion would never say doing great. And someone, how are you doing? And they would just say, being kept, being kept. And that became kind of Robin's, mantra as well. And of all the things you could talk about, being kept is probably the main, just the main lesson, through it all, with him. And we're just constantly being kept. I mean, he's alive. And if we're not in one of those situations where, we're at the football field or, wherever, I mean, that's what it is all the time. I mean, it's just life. When we're in our bubble, you don't even think about it. You're just living. And it is that reality. We have him. We have not lost him. And that's not a silver lining. I mean, that is a reality. We don't know what it is to lose, but we know what it looks like. We've been in the living room, not just merely me as a pastor with death my whole life, but with our people. We've lost with them and walked with them. So we know there's a journey that we have tasted, not. And you and Andrew, I mean, David, would always say this. I mean, it's 100%. There's only one number. You either 100% make it or you 100% don't. It's just 100%. And we've got that, that kind of reality, because the flip side is, I mean, these numbers are horrible. I mean, it's he's not supposed to, be here. There's not,
And when you look at him, I mean,
and that's how he lives it. And now he's reached the point. He goes, "Hey, when you're supposed to be dead anyways, you can just you have fun." I mean that's the kind of stuff he says to his sisters.
Living life to the full.
And that's what he tells his sisters all the time. I mean, the things
no
he,
complaining.
the things
no
he
complaining.
the things he says to them. You just sit there and just. You can just shake your head. He's gotten old enough that he can deal with it.
That makes me think of just life and every day that God appointed all our days before we were even born, and how precious life is. And one of the ways that you and I met was in talking about CMDA's work with the Supreme Court case that will be heard coming up for the abortion statutes from Mississippi,
The Dobbs case.
The Dobbs case. And just talking as a Christian physician and you as a pastor about life and the precious creation of the Lord, and you look at Andrew and you say, I mean, yes, life is precious. Life is precious. And God knew us and created us, knit us together in our mother's womb.
And when, because the twins were traumatic birth, they had an emergency deal. Robin had severe eclampsia, and we had to just go up and all that stuff. And that was the first time, putting on all the gears, and were taking us in. And Vanderbilt had walked down this long hallway. Going in the back, we're going in, and I've had to sit there and have the third conversation with the doctor. Robin may not make it, the babies may not make it, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm going down that, all the way down that thing, and it just ended up on there's a person on up ahead of me. I know where I'm going. I'm essentially alone walking all the way through it. And it started then, the experience with it, and then walking those same hallways, with Andrew as well. It's the two things, and that is, the Lord, has ordered, his days, and the days are numbered. He will not live one day longer, one day less, and it is by his design and his purpose and his glory. And whether it be in birth or as we've been going through this process, it's been a simple thing: live or die, you shall be kept. The Lord will, God will get us through. There'll be a reason. We will see it. We will know it. But even more than that, we shall know in heaven, because the first sign you had asked, and I forgot this, that I started just really wondering what was wrong with Andrew, is we went walking together on our road at the church, because I was having to prepare him because his sisters were making their public profession of faith. They function almost like triplets. I didn't want him to be feeling left out, but also want to know what was going on. And when I got home from that trip, there were two things. One, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't breathe, which now we know he had a mass, pressing on his lungs. But the other thing was, I told Robin when he got back, I said, I'm more convinced of his salvation than I am even of the girls. I mean, it was mind-boggling, the extent. I said, Andrew say, they just, and the thing that's been talking about with Andrew all these years is people follow his pictures on social media, and he's smiling in his attitude. And only once was there ever a time we said, Andrew, you got to smile. That was when, for the jingle fundraiser thing that they do for the Children's Hospital with Sanders with the, some kind of thing. And so they were taking pictures with a green screen because they used the kids' pictures, and he wouldn't smile. And I said, Andrew, this is for a fundraiser. You got to smile. and they took the picture, and he just dropped it down and just walked to his room.
Aww.
Other than that, every single smiles ever. We never said, smile, Andrew, take a picture.
I was neat.
It's just he's had a joy, a peace, a strength that is, he was born again, same before.
And tonight,
it all happened.
our school is celebrating or commemorating childhood cancer with the Go Gold tonight. So I thought that was neat that we were talking about this today. There's no coincidences with God. I say it's God's divine appointments
And times, and
it was a pleasure to meet you as a divine appointment.
you too as well.
And what's your favorite verse?
My verse is 1 John 1:9, and if that's when read instead of just doing preacher quoting. We confess our sins. He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And it's an important verse, for me as growing up a church kid in all my days of, rebellion. I struggled many years, never with the idea of being forgiven, but with the notion of being cleansed and being okay. And so you got to read the whole verse. We're not merely forgiven; we're made right. We're cleansed, and our sin is shameful, but in Christ, our cleansing, the shame is removed, and living that reality. So, 1 John 1:9.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.